Hey, remember that this is the last week that you can become a Patreon supporter and have a chance to win this set, unpainted set of these 5 buildings that you can use for Joan of Arc. So go ahead and click below and head over to Patreon and enter to see if you win for this month's drawing. We're going to do the drawing on Wednesday, July 31st. And so tune in and see who wins. Hey, Gaming Geek here, and we want to welcome you back, and as well Roger back from vacation. So finally we are back to gaming with a noob rather than without a noob. So I'm glad that Roger is here, and he's going to give his perspective on the paints that we did the last couple of episodes while he was gone. So I think it's super important to have the noob's perspective to reflect on the work that's happened so far before we proceed and continue on our slow progress through painting through all of the basic miniatures.
Well, it's great to be back, and I'm getting my first glance at all of this work, beautiful work that Gamer Geek here put together. And these scaled down buildings, they're absolutely amazing. You know, I've got them here in front of me. I'll give you some close-ups here. You know, they're just going to add great effect and ambiance to our gaming sessions. We're kind of discussing, you know, well, how are we going to do some of these overlays maybe? But we'll get into that later. But I just want to go through some of these buildings because they're so much fun. He surprised me by scaling down this other set of buildings he had. And watching the videos, you know, I kept saying, oh, but Gamer Geek, you got, you know, talk about this, talk about that as you're doing it. So one of the problems that I had when I first wanted to get into miniature painting, and I'm looking at all the videos and the literature, is the terminology that people would apply to these techniques. And so we've been getting some feedback as well, saying, oh, that's not that, it's this, and this is that. And so I just kind of wanted to clear it up, and whatever artist is out there is going to have his own kind of lingo, right? And so for the purposes of our video, I kind of just wanted to clarify a few things. We prime. That's the first thing that we do with any miniature. After we prime, or even before we prime, we should do some of that flash removal. So I kind of got into that problem when I was starting to paint on my own, that there was a bit of flash on these more than I expected to see. You know, we're kind of getting more advanced here, and in our original intro video we suggested just go out and buy some paints, buy some brushes, and go to work. We got a lot of flack in some of the comments saying, hey, look, you know, some of these pigments, these cheap pigments, it's just going to be an exercise in frustration, right? So it's true. You do want to invest in some quality paints, and you're going to find out what those paints are on your own. People have their own preferences. You know, I like the Army painters, but you know, some of those cheap acrylic that you buy at Walmart for 99 cents, those are great paints. You just got to work with them a little bit more. So we just kind of wanted to clear that up. Gamer Geek, he's just so talented and experienced. He can make any brush work, right? But for us noobs, we got to invest a little bit more, or give it a little bit more thought to the brushes. So I brought a bunch of my brushes today, and I want to show some things and just talk about that. And finally, you know, I also brought my glasses here today. Today we're going to paint Peasants, we're going to paint Pikemen, and basically we're just going to kind of summarize everything we did, lock in that terminology, and we'll be done for the day. Until next week. All right. The first thing I wanted to go over was some brushes. So I've got this whole old collection of brushes here that I've been using forever. You see these tips, they just have lost their point. This is just a super cheap brush. But so I just kind of wanted to give you a quick glance of what some crap brushes look like here. They're not all crap, but for the most part, these I should just pitch.
Yeah, and the way that you can really tell, because all brushes will flay out like this when it's dry. You can tell if you still have the tip by wetting it down. Mm-hmm. And so here you don't really have that fine of a tip.
Right.
And so
yeah,
this will be good for broad work where you don't need fine detail,
mm-hmm.
but yeah.
So at one time this is a great brush, and you can see all the paint on it, right? All right. So these are kind of my go-to brushes these days, and I just bought some new ones in here. So one thing I noticed when I was looking to buy some new brushes is there's these numbers on them, right? Mm-hmm. But I found out that when I'm looking at my own paint brushes, these numbers really don't make any sense.
Right.
So this guy here is a 0, and these are 2s. I don't get it, mm-hmm. right? So maybe it's the tip, but so you can't really buy your brushes based on these numbers. So basically, these brushes are going to come from experience, use. You find some that you like, you'll stick with it. The buildings. Oh, yeah, I didn't. So I just want to show these again. I know in the last thing. So this is the super exclusive Inn, and it's just a great building, right? Look at that beautiful painting. So we had some questions about, oh, that's not dry brushing. So let's talk about some of those things. So we call it priming. That's the first thing we do. We remove that flash. The next thing we do is base or block. Okay, so we're just going to block in all of the colors. We're going over these techniques again today. Finally, you dry brush or you highlight. Okay, two different techniques. The dry brushing, you know, we're not going to get into the cracks. Highlighting gets the edges of the detail, all right? So dry brushing is going to go over a big base thing, but when we highlight, we would just do an edge of like this tile, right?
And the paint isn't as dry. So literally dry brushing is your brush is fairly dry, not wet. That's why it doesn't go into, the paint doesn't go into the cracks.
And not wet meaning there's very little paint on that brush, right? So Gamer Geek's done some excellent videos on this. Check them out to really understand that technique. So that's the language we're going to use. Prime, block in the colors, dry brush, and highlight. All right. So, oh gosh, it's great. Here, I want to look at this tower that he did. So what's that was this from?
This is from Printable Scenery.
Printable Scenery. And you can go online and just type that in. And then you just scaled them down.
Yeah,
to our 15 millimeter level.
They're printed at 40%.
Yep.
And if you haven't seen that video, you can check out, click on the top right, and you can go to that video.
When I saw these videos, when I was out of the country, and I got so excited. I'm like, oh, wow. All right. So, great. Let's get started with a peasant today, okay? So I brought some of the figures, and I actually kind of started the peasant here a little bit, but not too much. Let me dig them out. Here's a peasant. So I primed in gray. And you can see that I just painted the flesh, right? So that's blocking. That's what we call blocking. One thing I want to emphasize when we're doing these is their colors. The guys that are going to have the bling and going to be bright and fanciful are your knights and heroes. Everybody else in this game is going to be drab, poor. You know, dyes were expensive. They couldn't afford them, so they had to wear whatever they had, right? See this beautiful group of archers here? I can't tilt this too much. But that is a medieval army, okay? You know, where guys had what they could, slapped it on, all right? And they're not flashy at all. We've got these mounted archers. Now, they own horses. They've got a little bit more color. You see some reds in there, right? But they're still pretty toned down. Now, these guys are the sergeant at arms, right? Now, sergeant at arms were some badass dudes. And a lot of them were mercenaries, and they could afford some mail and other things to help fight in the king's army. The king may have even supplied them with a few of these pieces, right? So they tend to be a little bit more showy, so they got some more color there. But, so kind of keep that in mind as you're painting. Now, the real bling is going to be these champions and these heroes, right? They're going to have these painted shields. They're going to have this frill for their horses, right? Here's the other one that Gamer Geek painted last week, right? So these are going to be the guys that are going to pop on your board, and they're going to stand out from everybody else.
And while Roger is doing that, I just want to note that even this isn't super realistic because not all of the regular clothing would be green back then. So it would be much more varied with light tans and browns, more likely than even a green. But This is where gameplay aesthetic might trump what was realistic during that time historically, because we wanted our archers to be somewhat uniform. That's why we just chose greens.
Yeah. And I'm just going to do his little cowl. Okay. I'm going to try to go fast. Yep. See, going fast though. I'm getting into his face, and now that's a mistake. This brush is actually working pretty well for me. And the cowl goes all the way down here. And I'm getting paint all over. It's my coffee this morning. There's a little over there. And there's really not much to be said about blocking, right? So there's his cowl. Get the little back here. All right, cowl's done. Let's go ahead and make the pikemen olive drab on this tunic here, or on their sleeves. See that? So I'm just going to slap some paint in there real fast. So we're blocking again. Remember, this is called blocking. And I'm typically not going this fast when I'm at home, but I just want to show you guys. And running out of paint there. It's getting a little thin, but that's okay. I can spread some from when I first started. All right, and he's got it on his legs here. So we're going to go ahead and, this is like some undergarment tunic. Looks like I got a good paintbrush here. Just going to press some paint in there like that. It's probably underneath these flaps of banded, right?
Yeah.
So we'll just do that real quick. So I'm just going to take some of this cheap white. All right, so, but I can still use it here. Boy, that's pretty white. I hope that wash brings it down.
It will, don't worry.
All right. Okay, we don't want to spend too much time here. We'll probably be fast forwarding in a second. Ooh, I globbed a lot of paint on that time. You can see, but I got to help spread it out here. So then again, that's all just technique over time, how much paint to charge. They call it a charge, right? You charge up the brush. So you see how white this guy is compared to this guy when I thinned out the paint a little bit. Okay, that's going to give it another interesting little effect, a little bit of differentiation. Let's do the club this deep brown. Okay, there's a couple knobs on that club. So we've had a lot of questions about speed painting, and we don't really understand what a person means. You know, I mean, you can always do more, but you really can't do much less than what we're showing here.
You could just spray paint them one color, so you could make possibly all of the peasants like a light tan, spray paint all of them light tan, and then if you wanted doing a wash on that. But I think it's worth the time to add some details, because it doesn't take that long to do, you know, do the faces flesh colored or change the cowls a different color. So some of you who might be asking for a speed painting technique, if you can explain in the comments below a little bit more what you mean by that, maybe we can help out. But for our sake, I think this is a good amount of work and effort that we put into painting that makes them distinguishable, but not so much detail that it's taking forever to get these done. So,
well, one thing that, you know, for instance, on these cowls, you can, you see my paint was kind of runny in that white, but on these cowls, and it might be hard to see, there are some little lines that string up their cowl over their head. Now that would be some insane detail, right? So a lot of people would just ignore that, and but you know, I'm gonna get that. It's a little bit of a raised area there, but if you're into speed painting, you know, you could forget little tiny details like that, right? So what kind of mail do you think that guy's wearing here? Some kind of studded or banded.
maybe it's leather mail, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like a thick, I think padded. That's what it is. It's padded leather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I got some fine detail here that my brush isn't quite helping me with, but I've also got some big areas. All right, so I picked up some of this auburn shadow, and we'll go ahead and do that leather. All right, again, because my skill level isn't as good as GamerGeek, and I can't just do the tip and get the right amount of paint, I went to a finer brush, and we'll try and paint it now. Yeah, now I just want to run it over the top. I'm going to paint the bag that color too. Oh yeah, this is looking good. Again, this is just fine detail work. You're probably getting out of your lines, doing the best I can.
Yeah, and so a peasant would not have a bright red garment or a belt or sack. So having this rustic red is more natural and more...
Yeah, that looks like a belted leather. I don't really know what's going on in this area right here where I kind of missed the paint. So I kind of avoided it earlier. Yeah,
whenever there's details on a miniature and you're not quite sure what it is, you sort of have to make a decision as an artist and figure out what you want to do with it.
And just throw a color in there, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to use that same auburn red now on the Pikemen's boots. Just so we use up all that paint that I pulled out, right? So these are good leather boots he's got on. Oh, there's some laces on those boots we could get if we wanted to go for that extreme detail, which I like doing, you know? When there's those little bitty details on these little bitty figures, it just adds that much more to it. So the Noob today really wasn't taking his time, and the got a little messy, right? Was experimenting with brushes. In the end, I finally found the brush that I liked the best today. But you can see how some of my paint ran, how I got out of the lines here and there. But Gamer Geek says that's okay. And we're going to leave these guys' boots gray. And we're going to do the wash on these now. And let's see what happens to all of this messiness that, you know, and I missed the spot over there. But let's see what the wash does, how it covers up these sins. All right. Okay, so for the final wash here, we decided to go with the darker tone because hopefully this is going to cover up more of my sins. Just going to load up the brush and go to town. It always scared me when I did this. And you really just want to pour this stuff on. Yeah, he's getting nice and dirty from that. And that's what we want. And I think that's about it, huh?
I put a little bit more.
A little bit more, okay. Yeah, so we really want to drown it.
Yeah.
Okay. And yes, that is covering up my sins. Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Okay, we're going to move back to the Pikemen real quick and grab their faces. Again, I'm using that nice little brush. I probably got too much of a charge on there. I'm going to reduce it. Pikeman's face is up underneath that helmet, behind that cowl. Ooh, I probably should have done that cowl in the green. And that's live and learn. Oh, there's that flashing I was talking about earlier. That needs to be removed. You see this, where am I with my brush here? Right there underneath his hand. So I found that a lot on these pikemen. All right, so I set the paint down. This isn't the time to be doing this because my paint's drying. So I really wanted to do this, as I mentioned at the start of the video, before you prime, right? And so there's that little piece of flashing that's going to come off, if I can cut it off properly. Let's go back for these belts over here. I like that idea of the black. Yes, I do. See, I'm probably going to go after those studs on my own.
Make it silver?
Yep. Kind of like that. So I need to invest in more colors because I don't like doing all that shade, you know, that mixing to get different tones and stuff like that. I just want to grab a bottle, slap it on the mini, right? But, you know, economical, you can just take a color, mix it with black and or white, or in the case of that brown, mix some red into it, mix some yellow into it. But I don't want to go for all that. And see, my paintbrush is split. Yeah, it's really light. The water on that one, you can see where it really spilled over the edge because I had too much water on my brush, so the charge isn't very thick. Oh, okay, so we're going to use some plate mail metal from Army Painters. This is a metallic. Guys, I've really been bad about keeping things in the camera today. And the helmet.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and we got that little buckler on that shield. They have this tiny little buckler. So I guess once they're overrun, they would pull out the buckler in their sword, and then the tip of the sword here gets that silver. Doink, 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 doink. Studs. I'm going to go back and look at the Peasants now after they've dried in their wash and see if these are table ready minis now, even with all of my sins. So here we have some dirty, filthy peasants ready to club some people over the head. And you know all those mistakes that I made before? Do you remember where they are? No. kind of went away. So really the only bad one is that cowl where that white was too thin. And these are ready to hit the table. All right, so silver takes a little longer to dry, but these guys are all ready for their wash right now. And it takes a fair bit of this wash. This is an expensive thing. And again, we're just going to pour it on. Pour that stuff on. Oh, you know, that would have been helpful. Well, Gamer Geek just showed me the light. Oh, see, that's getting into that padding.
Yeah,
really nice. Yeah. So, these haven't quite dried yet, but they darkened up. Again, my sins have disappeared, which is really what washes are all about. I love it. So there's the one, and here's the other guy, just like him. Okay, so, yeah.
Looks really good, Roger.
Well, thank you, Gamer Geek. So, hey, anybody can do this, right? So I just was in the front of the camera all day myself. I know I went in and out, but you too can paint. So take it from a noob. All right. We'll see you guys.